Welcome to this panel discussion on building an innovative workplace. So from edge to cloud, computing to analytics to AI, Lenovo has partnered with Intel to constantly strive for innovation. My name is Lee Williamson. I'm the Regional Editorial Director of Gen.T, which is Tatler's community-focused content and events platform for young leaders who are shaping the future of Asia. I'm delighted to be joining you today, and not just because I've been trapped in Hong Kong for 3 years now, this is one of my first times out, but I'm delighted to be talking to you about a consequential topic, how to build an innovative workplace, with two entrepreneurs from the Gen.T community who are doing just that. Rena Dharmawan, ladies and gentlemen. Rena Dharmawan is furthering the frontiers of surgical innovation, founding two medtech startups, Privy Medical and Jagger.Me. She's also Assistant Dean and Professor at the Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Duke NUS Medical School, where she initiated a healthcare innovation program for students. So I can't imagine a better person to come and talk to us today about innovation. And alongside Rena, we have Maxim Tint. Give it up for Maxim. Maxim is developing the latest technologies to make it easier to check in. His company, G-Trip, uses machine learning to verify photo IDs, as well as biometric sensors and digital keys on smartphones to enable faster, contactless, and more secure access at commercial properties such as hotels and offices. So please join me one more time in welcoming Rena and Maxim. Welcome, both of you. So the word innovation gets thrown around a lot in the media. You know, to some, it's a new patent. To others, innovation is a new way to organize the apps on your phone's lock screen, right? So let's start with a definition. What does innovation mean to you? Rena, do you want to kick us off?
Hi. Everyone can hear me. Hi. So I'm actually a general surgeon and a head and neck surgeon at SGH and National Cancer Center, and also very involved in I guess they call it innovation in healthcare. So I guess to me, what's innovation? There's a really big difference between innovation and invention. Okay, so invention to us in healthcare is really research. Right, you're coming up with new ideas, using grant money to basically come up with new research. For me, innovation is how do you make this research useful, and useful in healthcare is how do you actually improve patient outcomes. So how do you actually use these inventions and making it useful to actually improve our patients' outcomes? To me, that's the definition of innovation, specifically in healthcare innovation, where that's kind of where I am from.
Maxim, what's your take?
I concur what she said. Like Rena said, there's this invention piece. So when we have a tech business in early days, before we even have the first customer, we can file patents, 3-4 patents, and there's literally the word inventor on the patent, but that's not commercialized yet. So to me, innovation is not just an idea, not even just a patent, but really bringing this to market, really impacting human lives at scale, and preferably you also could create a commercially sustainable business out of that, so that creates a cycle, a flywheel effect to continue to innovate. So to me, that is really innovation making changes to people's lives.
Absolutely, it's about the impact, it's about the end product as well as the process. Well said. It's said that you can't teach artistic talent, right? You can't teach creativity, but can you teach innovative thinking? Maxim, I'll go to you first.
I think some might be a bit more gifted in this than the others. I don't think I'm an innovative person by birth. So, but there's a lot of nature versus nurturing, right? So for example, I took up this module in Stanford called Design Thinking, which kind of helped me a lot to really have empathy in real life problems and how to apply the technology. So me being a former coder, that's not really innovation. So I started from more like the invention tech side of things, but setting education, setting real life mentoring could really help a person to go towards this innovation trajectory.
Rena, principles that we'll all be familiar with, like design thinking, where we start with empathy, can this be a roadmap to teach someone innovative thinking, or is it more nature, something you're born with?
I think it's a mixture of both, really. But I feel that we can actually teach a process And this is something that, again, my role in Duke and US Medical School is to really create a curriculum where we are trying to teach young medical students to be what we call clinician innovators, to understand innovation. And the curriculum that we really teach is that we want to teach them a needs-driven innovation. So there's really two kinds of innovation. Again, unfortunately, my expertise is more in healthcare, so I always take it back to healthcare, right? So needs-driven innovation and a technology-driven innovation. So a technology-driven innovation, I'll explain that first. Basically, someone who comes in, a scientist or an engineer who has a technology, and you are going in to try to find a use case for that specific technology. That's something that we call a technology-driven innovation, and it's very common, and it works. But what we advocate is that, hey, instead of starting from a technology-driven innovation, you really need to do more needs-driven innovation. You understand the problem. How big is it a problem? What's the market size? What's the incidence, prevalence? Are the healthcare professionals really want to use it? Does the patients really want to use it? You start with a problem first. You understand the problem so well, understand the pain point, and then you brainstorm the solution to actually solve that specific problem. And then along the way, in our curriculum, we then teach, the patenting strategy, regulatory strategy, clinical strategy, and whatnot. So I think back to your question is it nature or is it can be taught? I think that what we are trying to do is that we can actually teach a very systematic process that usually works, but then again, it really comes to that specific individual, and they call entrepreneurs, there's a specific character of entrepreneurs, right? You really need to be resilient, you really need to be that kind of character to actually take the process and make it work.
So what I'm getting from that is start with why, right? Like identify the problem that you want to solve and then find out the best way to get there. Don't say, I want to develop a cool technology, because that may not answer an audience need, a user need. What I want to ask you now is the most creative, even the most creative outside of the box minds, right? It's difficult to innovate in the wrong system. So how do you create a workplace environment or an academic environment to foster an innovative mindset in your teams? So Maxim, you mentioned design thinking, which has a clear process beginning with empathy. Is that something that you use at G-Trip to encourage and foster a culture of innovation among your product teams or technology teams and so on?
There are two parts to that questions and also the answer. So first of all, you're right, the inner why is so important. So when you start with the problem, your internal compass is clear. I started this business because I want humans to be able to eventually travel without photo IDs. So that inner why is not technology driven, it's just a mission. And whatever technology it takes to solve it, so in an early version of the product, we're using fingerprints, touch IDs. But the technology changes. Today, you can't buy an iPhone with the touch ID anymore. It has become a different kind of technology. It's Face ID today, facial recognition. So to me, the technology, yes, I used to be a programmer, but it's secondary. The inner compass, that why gives you the resilience to continue to innovate. The second part of that question, the organization, the infrastructure that you set up is pretty important. So a culture that allows people to be okay to fail, and you create a psychologically alright environment for your team to try to push the envelope, and even if they screw up, they learn and try again. I think that ability to fail with grace and fail fast is pretty important. If you're going to scold them every time they fail, no one's going to bother trying with innovation.
Right, absolutely. Same question to you, Rena, but if I can, I'd like to add a further add-on, which is like, all that is great. How do you sustain that as well? Because it's difficult to get there in the first place, right? So how do you sustain that over many years?
I wanted to reinforce the culture thing, and I personally, so I was, in Singapore especially, it's really hard, right? I mean, failing in Singapore in general is, you grew up in Singapore, I grew up in Singapore. Failing especially is extremely no-go, and even more so in healthcare. Okay, if you do something wrong, it's a person's life at stake. So to be honest with you, creating this healthcare, this innovation culture, in my perspective, is in our industry is actually extremely difficult, and back there. So sustaining it as well is actually very difficult. So to me, what it is that I feel it starts from leadership. And if leadership is, is pushing for this, and allows a space where people, whoever wants to try something differently, they create like a sandbox or a different space to allow people to just try. And you can try it not first in patients, you can try it in a lot of other ways as well. So to me, it's a culture, and actually very important is always leadership.
Right,
Yeah.
culture is key. I think you've both mentioned that, which brings me on to something I really want to ask both of you as well, which is about fostering that culture and creating a happy team. So Lenovo's Think Report 2022, which was released recently, examined the state of thinking today and into the future, surveying thousands of business leaders worldwide. The report stated that 58% of its respondents say it's either extremely or very difficult to do their best thinking when feeling burned out or fatigued. So employee wellness, having happy workers, is a part of the puzzle too, right? As well as teaching certain cultures, it's about making sure your people are happy. People are not going to come up with great new ideas if they're not engaged and happy in what they're doing. So, how do you support in employee wellness and keep that front of mind, even when you have deadline after deadline to also be thinking about? Who wants to take that first?
Give me always the hard one, walao.
Okay.
Wow, wellness. Wellness when I was training, right, was like totally out of the question. We as doctors just work hard, and we stay post-call and everything. Actually now in SGH, there is actually a deputy CEO for wellness. And they just started last year, and it's my boss or colleague of mine, and it's good to see that they are actually starting this, and they call it joy at work. So, for example, junior doctors, right? Now, last time for us when we were training, we need to stay when you're on call overnight for 24 hours. You can only go home the next day when you are when you're done with your work. And sometimes I remember staying in the hospital for like 36 hours. Now you're not allowed. At 8 a.m., all the junior doctors have to go home. And this was all reinstated by this, because of all these things. So I'm glad to see that it's this wellness thing and everything is in place. And as you rightly mentioned, for people to be creative and whatnot, you do need some form of wellness lah. But it's a tough question.
The average daily use of the ThinkPad we learned was 12 hours a day. Were you surveying the medical professionals? I feel like that number would go up quite a bit.
Oh, wait, but honestly speaking, all our computers in Sing Health is, I think, Lenovo. Like mine is Lenovo.
There you go, the 36-hour workhorse. So you can put that on the box.
Yeah. But I think you drop it, it's okay.
As we all learned.
All the junior doctors do funny things, and it's okay. So I think that's kind of why they invested in it.
Great, Maxim. Startups, wellness culture is a bigger part, I think, than it is in the medical profession traditionally. How do you make sure your employees, your team, are happy and in their best state of mind to innovate?
I think at the first place, I have not been a very good boss for myself. I sometimes do not practice what I preach. But one thing that I learned is recently I learned this trick. Do not send Slack messages just by clicking send. You hold the send button down. There'll be a little pop-up that says schedule to send the next morning, 9 a.m. And that little button really impacted a lot of my team's mental wellness. So you would not send a message at 6:30 p.m., 9 p.m., 11 p.m. with a new feature, a new change request, a big fire to put out unless really urgent. So that simple gesture kind of gives people the space to rest, sleep without too much stress, and the next morning come back to office fresh. Even email clients, Outlook has this new feature, of course available on Lenovo laptops, I guess, is instead of just click send, the person that you're sending, if they are on Microsoft Exchange, they will say they're in a time zone where they're probably sleeping. Would you rather send the next morning instead? So gestures like this from the leadership kind of send the right signal that, I care about you as a human. This could be urgent, but probably you need to be in the right state of mind to do this well. So I think this goes a long way towards mental well-being.
Absolutely. So this June, there was an anniversary of a time this June when the world heralded an exciting new technology company that used social video in an exciting new way. That company was called
TikTok.
It was called Vine, and it was 10 years ago today. It's a good reminder Because I bet you there's very few people using TikTok right now that have ever heard of Vine, right? It's just one example of how the rapid pace of technology and evolution waits for no one, right? What steps are you taking to ensure that you and your teams are equipped to keep learning, keep evolving, and be as innovative 10 years down the line as you are today? Maxim, I'll go to you first. You're always innovating, and your tech is crucial to what you're doing as well.
This is a very good example. The last thing we want to be is like Vine. So when I started this, what we're trying to do, getting people straight from Changi Airport into the hotel rooms without checking in was illegal. Today, it is legalized. Government has officially endorsed this, but there are now 25 companies in the world trying to do this as well. So we have to constantly keep up with that pace of innovation. So for example, one of the latest innovation we're now working on is building our own neural networks and machine learning to do a liveness check. So it's like a reverse of a deep fake. You might be trying to fool the system with a deep fake, but I have deep learning to detect the deep fakes. So this kind of constant innovations are the kind of things that makes the difference between a Vine and a TikTok, I guess.
And when you're doing 36-hour days, how do people in the medical profession? It must be particularly difficult for people in your profession to find time to keep learning. How do you do that, and what can people in the audience, take away from that?
Sorry, you were saying?
The need to continue to learn. When the day-to-day is so all-consuming, we still need to be keeping up to date with how things are progressing, evolving.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I've just always been, or what my parents call me, a professional. I just keep collecting degrees, right? So I really do like. I'm doing this because I'm an engineer trained, and then I went in to do medicine, and now I'm doing my MBA. And so my parents are like, you are just crazy. But to me, it's
like Pokemon. You got to catch them all.
I got to catch them all, right? No, but going to that is that it's just because it's how my career has evolved. The reason why I do tech in medicine is because I was an engineer, and once I did tech, and you needed to understand the startup scene and everything, I felt that what's lacking was I did not understand the business side of things, and I needed a little bit more content in that, and so that's why it came. So for me, I guess, to be honest with you, I think the answer is more personal. So the individual, you really need to just constantly want to keep putting out more knowledge. So that's, yeah. But answer back to where he left off, right? I think that's kind of the good thing about being in medical devices sometimes, because the barrier for anyone to come into entry is higher. Why? Because we have, regulatory barriers, we have IP barriers, we have, clinical barriers because we have already done a clinical trial. So for someone else to come in, the barrier is always higher. But then again, I've learned from my first startup is that you can't just be a one-product company. You actually need to figure out how do you actually be a platform with your platform IP, generate more and more products from that. So that's kind of, I guess, if you say keep being innovative, it's you also need to start right from the beginning. But I'm very happy I'm not in that side where you have to keep. Wow, it's very difficult. But for us,
some people enjoy. I get bored with the same product after 2-3 years, so then it kind of helps me build the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, last question from me, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor. So, when our lovely panelists are answering my final question, please do be thinking about things you want to ask our panelists, and we'll call on those of you that do want to raise your hand. So Harvard Business Review has written about the paradox of innovative cultures. It was something that you touched upon earlier, actually. So while the classic characteristics of a culture of innovation are desirable both for founders and for employees, because this culture of innovation offers a tolerance for failure, which you mentioned, a willingness to experiment, psychological safety, they're highly collaborative, they're generally quite non-hierarchical, but they're hard to implement and maintain because of a lot of paradoxes within your typical innovative culture. For example, there's a tolerance for failure, but not incompetence. There's a willingness to experiment, but you need to be highly disciplined. You want to create a psychologically safe environment for people, but you need to be brutally candid in the feedback to get the best possible product. You need strong leadership, but you need a flat hierarchy. Do you see these paradoxes in your lines of work? And if so, how do you overcome some of them, or one that you want to pick out in particular? Maxim.
It is true that there is a opposite and ugly side of every good culture. So if your organization structure is flat, everyone can have a great idea, and sometimes you lose track of who is in charge of things anymore. So personally, one of the things that really helped me calibrate this is having the right mentors who are straight shooters and who are able to tell you in your face that, hey, Max, your organization structure is probably too flat. You probably need to get somebody in charge of certain things. And people, it could even be your spouse who is not afraid to tell you the truth in your face. So
having a safe space for that candid feedback almost. Yeah.
So I guess that kind of external input from people that you trust, your mentors, it could even be your board of directors, investors, whoever that is aligned with you in your interest to want to make you see successful. I guess that kind of mentorship really helps you calibrate that downside of every culture.
Actually, I want to hear the answer from Intel, from a big corporate company, right? How do you encourage innovation in your because to me it's not easy. I mean, I come from Singhouse, my employers. What we just start thinking about is this sandbox things that we have tried, and the other thing that I personally feel is that to start training them young. So I invest more in medical students and residents instead of training the older doctors, because it's very hard to get them to think. But I feel that it's actually quite difficult to be innovative, especially if you come from MNC or big corporate industry. Startups, it's okay. SME is okay, but big companies, I feel that it's very hard. I've never been in a big corporate company, so I'm not sure. Actually, I'm interested to hear what you guys
Would you like
have
to take the
say.
stage?
Yeah.
I promise this was not set up, guys. This is, you can see by the look of surprise in his eyes, I think.
I apologize, but I'm actually interested to hear.
No worries. Yeah. So at Intel, innovation is essential to our survival, because I don't know if you've heard of Moore's law. Yeah. Moore's law was by one of our founders, which essentially said that every 1.5 years, 18 months, the number of transistors on a given piece of silicon will double. Now that is a law, and it will happen. It will happen with or without us. And so if we miss those steps, somebody else is going to do that, much to your point, right? And so it is not, we missed for about 2 years. We kind of slept at the wheel, so to say, and today we are in some bit of a pain. And so now for the next 4 years, our CEO has promised that we will have 5 steps, or what we call nodes, 5 nodes in 4 years, right? So we are now going to just be at a tremendous pace of innovation that we've never done before, because we have to do it for our leadership. So at Intel, that culture is kind of built. And agreed, there's an engineering side. I come from the sales side, but the engineering side is tuned to give that innovation, at every step, every day, because they're just chasing a law that is, that's a given. And so, so from the start, when you talk about culture, this openness, there are some cultural elements that have been taught to us. One of them is disagree and commit. There are a few, but one of the ones that I like is just disagree and commit. And then very close to it is that you're tackling the problem, not the person. So when you get into a meeting, you can get into a heated argument, and you have to constantly remind yourself that you're not up against a person, but against the problem. And you can be in a room with 5 people, and you can disagree, but at the end of the meeting, you have to commit to it, to whatever step you're taking. Because if you go out of the room with 5 different opinions and 5 different actions, you'll never get to that point of innovation. So things like that have been deeply embedded in the culture. They're taught when you join. And it is there not just in engineering, but also in sales. And some of that helps.
Incredibly good answer for someone put on the spot. Round of applause, I think, is in order. So would you like to fire back with an impromptu question to put Rena on the spot? If not, we're going to open now to the floor. And anyone who has a question, Nigel.
Yeah, I just want to follow up, because I was in the health industry before you were born. Yeah. So I was in Hewlett Packard. I was in charge. I was the project manager for the Ministry of Health, right? And you talk about innovation, then there was no such thing called innovation. And then there wasn't even such word called innovation. All right, it's called revolution. Either you change it or you don't. And these days, the health industry has innovated tremendously. I remember doing this project in the polyclinics, and they were the first mini computers, and on the behind was the mainframe. It was mainly IBM. In the front is mainly a HP. I was in charge of the patient registration system, right? And it was a breakthrough. Honestly, in the whole Southeast Asia, we were the first that computerized it to have patients to be registered online in person. But it was a disjoint thing because the front doesn't talk to the back and the back doesn't talk to the rest of the world, right? And those days, doctors were so anal about just writing on a record, right? Just like lawyers. I was also in charge of the law fraternity, right? Getting them to task on the keyboard, it was a pain. And it took us 20 years. 20 years to have your records from the patient record all the way to a universal record it is today. It started from the Minister of Health, Yeo Cheow Tong, until today. So you were not born then, right? I remember, I still remember SGH. The SGH data center was next to the mortuary. Did you realize that?
They purposely put you there.
Because in the past, data centers was not known. You know, it was never known. What was IT? It was never known. So they just find a space. They can put a mini computer, power up, link it by a LAN, and then those days were coaxial cable, not today fiber. It was thick, and you had to lay it physically, point to point. And that was called revolution, right? But today, the way the patient record is managed is really innovation. And I think Singapore has done a tremendous good job in terms of patient care, in terms of the way we treat the records, right? I think we are first class in this part of the world. Of course, we will compare the rest of the world, we're still way behind, but I think there's a lot of improvement to be had, and that's where the innovation, right? And how does the multinational us able to do it? Is in collaboration with customers like the medical industry. We can't just do it alone. So it's actually a collaboration of all the industries.
No, and I agree. I think we come with the problem, you come with the tech, and it's a perfect marriage. I always agree. Yeah.
And thank you, Nigel, for reminding us that, you know, if your why is big enough, if the problem you're trying to solve is great enough, innovation doesn't happen overnight as well. It can take years. It can potentially take decades. So we live very busy lives, a lot of, you know, information constantly. So people will probably not remember this panel in 2-3 months' time. But if they remember one thing that you want them to take away in 3 months and 6 months, this time next year, if they still remember one thing from this panel, what should it be in terms of innovation? Rena.
I think to build onto what we just said, to me, actually, the next step is really to collaborate. And you need a multidisciplinary. You know, as we said, right, we are healthcare. We come with problems. We do need tech partners to, and it's that's kind of the only way I feel. So to me, the big takeaway I feel is that we do need to collaborate a lot more between the different industries and different disciplines. So that's kind of, to me, important, and it'll be great to see more of that.
Final word rests with you, Maxim.
One story when I learned as a kid that really stuck with me was about Edison when he invented or created the first light bulb. The first few did not work. So he kept trying until he eventually got a light bulb that could actually light up. And I was like probably 6, 7 when I heard that story. So that kind of stuck with me and saying, you know, you're probably going to screw up a lot, fail a lot of times, and struggle to come back and build the next light bulb that actually works.
The first few will give you an electric shock.
The next one
will burn the house down, but eventually you will get there. Inspiring words from you, Maxim Tint, and also from Rena Dharmawan as well. Thank you so much, both of our panelists. Give them a massive round of applause. Thank you very much.